The most fundamental aspect of any first-person shooter is aiming, and Apex Legends is no different. However, Apex has a ton of unique gimmicks in comparison to your average shooter when it comes to aiming and getting better at it. And in this video, I'll be going over the differences by showing you the top 5 tips on how to get better at aiming in Apex Legends on controller or on PC. The first tip should be a staple in any game you play, and that is to have an established warm-up routine. Warming up allows your body to get acclimated to using aiming techniques, but also to get used to playing Apex in general with its FOV settings and also the type of gameplay you'll be doing. By warming up, you can also avoid tilting and dropping right into the game because you are not warmed up, or you're not as you should be playing. I find that players who tend to drop right into the game instead of warming up are much more irritable and are likely to tilt earlier in their gaming sessions with their friends. So do yourself and your teammates a favor by warming up for 5 to 10 minutes right before your gaming session starts. Doesn't have to be too long, but just enough for you to get acclimated to playing. Now you may be asking, what am I supposed to be doing for those 5 to 15 minutes? And this question leads right into point 2, which is to know how the guns work. Pro players and high-ranked players alike are used to using each gun in the game. And so if you want to become a more consistent player and a better player, you need to be somewhat comfortable using each gun in the game. Just like in any game you end up playing, there's a learning curve to how each gun works. For example, each gun uses a different ammo type and also has a unique recoil pattern. You can get comfortable with each gun by using it in your warm-up routine each time you play. Use a couple different guns to use for a week or two until you're comfortable using them in practice range and then in normal matches. I find that using them with no attachments at first is the best way to do it because when you're right off of drop, the guns aren't going to have attachments anyways, and they're not going to be fully decked out with barrel stabilizers and magazines. To warm up properly, I would actually recommend to try to counteract the recoil pattern that the gun has. Spray into the wall, see the pattern, and try to counteract that. This will take some getting used to, but it'll be well worth it when you have it in your muscle memory. After you have a basic understanding of the bullet pattern of a gun, I recommend using the basic weapon and to try to one-clip the target either to the far left or to the far right. Stand right in front of the target, around 10 meters away, and try to one-clip it. After you're done with that, try to one-clip the target right next to it to the right or to the left. It will be hard to one-clip the target on the far right side or the far left side, but you can kind of use it to see how good you are at counteracting recoil. After you're comfortable with using a gun for a couple weeks or days depending on how the progression level is going, you can switch it up to another one and start the process all over again. Now I know I just said that you should get used to the recoil pattern of the guns in the game, and you should, but what if I told you there is a way to completely negate recoil when you're shooting on your targets? Tip 3 is something the community likes to call recoil smoothing. Recoil smoothing is something that Apex Legends put in the game to help counteract recoil when you move or when your mouse is moving at a certain speed. Without this mechanic, aiming at moving targets would be extremely hard, especially with Apex Legends' large health pool and time to kill. It would be crazy to pull off. Recoil smoothing is done when your crosshair is smoothly moving horizontally across your screen at a certain rate and above. In order to use recoil smoothing, you simply move your mouse or a joystick horizontally while aiming. You can also pair this with strafing while moving your crosshair to track your enemies and your targets. I like to pair this with strafing in the opposite direction of your target, while aiming and pulling in the opposite direction. This helps with the speed in which your mouse is moving and helps you recoil smooth even more. As you can see, this mechanic basically negates all recoil, and you don't really even need to pull down that much while aiming. Recoil smoothing is a mechanic that is used in another kind of aiming called jitter aiming, which is basically when you rapidly move your crosshair side to side at a high rate. Like I said before, recoil smoothing is when you're moving your crosshair at a certain speed horizontally. And so the idea of jitter aiming is to jitter side to side horizontally at your target at a high rate, completely negating recoil. Jitter aiming is a more advanced form of recoil smoothing and is a lot harder to pull off, especially on controller, but it is possible. If this is a topic you're interested in learning more about in another video, please let me know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure to leave a subscription and also a like if you're enjoying the video. Now moving back to the video. When you master both recoil smoothing and jitter aiming, you'll basically have no recoil at any range that you end up fighting at, and you will dominate the competition. The fourth tip is another essential mechanic in Apex Legends that is different compared to most other shooter style games. And that tip is to know when to hipfire versus ADSing. In most games, hipfiring hip-firing is used at extremely close ranges. However, in Apex Legends, that range is much further than you are probably used to. Knowing at what range to hip-fire and at what range to aim down your sights is crucial if you want to get better at the game. There are pros and cons to both ADSing and to hip-firing. For hip-firing, the cons include a much wider bullet spread, and with that, it's harder to hit your target. But some of the pros include a higher movement speed and strafing capabilities, while also being harder to hit. When it comes to hip-firing, the ideal range in Apex is actually around 10 meters. At this range, you can consistently hit body shots and sometimes even headshots if you're aiming in the right area. What is nice is that you have a great chance at hitting your target at 10 meters while strafing and using your crouching key to dodge bullets. The increased movement speed from hip-firing is amazing at keeping you alive while also getting great damage in. Just make sure you have that dot in the center of your crosshair as close to the target as possible, as that is the starting point to where bullets hit and it spreads on from there. It is not complete random. It goes from the center and out. And now to ADSing. The cons for ADSing is that you slow down tremendously with your movement speed when you're strafing side to side, and you're also easier to hit. But the pros include having a much tighter bullet spread, which means you're able to hit targets easier if you are aiming properly. When you're ADSing, you're basically a sitting duck, and you are pretty easy to hit. At close ranges, it is practically a death sentence to shoot ADS, and your target will most likely wipe the floor with you before you can actually hit them properly. Especially since at close ranges, targets will be moving a lot more while hip firing, so it'll be harder to hit your target. So unless you're just a goat at aiming, I probably wouldn't recommend this. In order to get better at telling when to ADS and when to hip fire, I would recommend making a mental note of where the 10-meter mark is while playing. Once someone is close to that mark or is inside of it, hip fire a gun while strafing and crouching. This will take some time to get used to, especially if you've come from games like Call of Duty or some other games like that. But stick with the 10-meter rule and you'll get better in no time. The final point of this video is to focus on your target. Do you often miss your target by a few milliseconds? Do you find that you're lagging in front of or behind of your target and you're barely missing your shots? This can often be because of focusing too much on your crosshair instead of your target. Apex is a movement-heavy game, and tracking your target is essential if you want to do well. So instead of trying to look at your crosshair and bring the target to it, look at your target and track its movements and bring your crosshair to it instead. You could do this by trying to look right past your crosshair and directly tracking the target. It may seem like this is counterintuitive to look at your target and not looking at your crosshair, but trust me, it works. Your muscle memory is much better than you may think it actually is. It may take some time to get used to, but I can assure you that you will hit more shots if you get used to focusing on your target instead of your crosshair. By combining all these tips, I believe that you'll start to become better at aiming in Apex Legends and will be one step closer to whatever goal you have in mind. I hope you found this guide useful. If you want to support me, you could do that by liking the video and also subscribing as well. If you want to see other content like this in the future, leave recommendations down in the comments to let me know. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.